We're at the National Weather Service in Chanhassen, Minnesota. And with me today is Todd Krause, who is a meteorologist here, assigned here, and he's going to give us some of his thoughts on the tornadoes of 1965. Todd has always had a big interest in that period. He's obviously too young to have witnessed it, but he has the great interest, obviously, as a meteorologist. And Todd, I'd like to, and I think you and I did talk about that a little bit in the past. What kind of coverage was there in 1965? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of it that we didn't have, that you have today that we didn't have then.
Yeah.
In terms of the prognostication of where that storm is going.
Yeah. There is so much more nowadays that we've learned about storms compared to 1965. But even in 65, they had a pretty good idea of what sort of things to look for. But now it's so much better. In 65, they could look at some very basic radar pictures, and they had the weather forecast maps, but they really didn't know all that much about how and why tornadoes formed, or the specifics. You could look at a thunderstorm on the radar and not really tell quite very well whether or not that storm was going to produce a tornado. Nowadays, the knowledge has advanced a lot, and we can look at radar and get a good handle on things. But the amazing thing is that radar is still a machine, and you have to have people out there watching. So we've got a much better idea of storms. We can make a much better estimate whether or not that storm has a tornado, but it still requires people out there watching.
One of the areas of interest that I've always had about that, because I was in that tornado along with many others, and my remembrance is that it came on quite suddenly. There were some warnings, but all of a sudden it was on top of us. I've always been curious how far out of the state did this generate? Was it born out of the areas of the Great Plains, and then it swept up into the northern from the south to the northern Great Plains, or was this something that came out, in a closer proximity, started in a closer proximity to our area, to the area that got hit?
The interesting thing about May 6th is that there were storms in the morning, and there were storms and tornadoes the previous day. Southeast Minnesota had plenty of tornadoes on May 5th, and then parts of western Minnesota had tornadoes on May 5th as well. And then you throw in the morning storms on the 6th, and so thunderstorms were in the forecast, and they had an idea there might be severe weather.
Had there been severe weather like that further west, further south, or not? Or was that...
On the previous day, there had been severe weather in southernmost Minnesota and western Minnesota. Earlier on the 6th, to my understanding, there was no severe weather earlier in the day. There were a few thunderstorms up in the Cambridge area, St. Cloud, but nothing with severe weather that I've been able to find. And so the storms didn't really move from Kansas and Oklahoma up here.
So they were not connected to,
no.
To that part of it?
The actual storms that produced the tornadoes essentially developed out of thin air in the late afternoon hours. And that's very, very common when you have a severe weather day, where all of a sudden thunderstorms erupt in the middle of the afternoon, late afternoon, and produce tornadoes very quickly. And that seems to have been the case back on May 6th.
I remember the day as being very, very warm, very hot and humid, until the storms hit. There's that change.
Mm-hmm.
changed everything.
One of the differences nowadays, we have a pretty good idea of what the conditions are that lead to severe weather. Sometimes we've got that idea several days ahead of time, and we'll be putting out something called a hazardous weather outlook now, and we will talk about the potential for severe weather even several days from now. That gives people a heads up so that they can anticipate that when it gets to be that day, they might pay a little bit closer attention to television and radio and weather radio so that they are aware that severe weather is on the way. So by us getting out the advance word, I think that's a very important factor in fewer lives being lost today.
What about basements? We're still talking about people heading to basements, and I can remember my Uncle Bill in 1935 and before that having us crawl down the basement in the middle of summer because of an impending storm that he thought was coming. We had no electricity on the farm, and I don't know how but he was pretty good. He lived long enough to know the weather conditions, how he felt, holding a wet finger up in the air. So we have, I suppose in many ways we've come a long ways, but we used to go down into the dirt cellars on the farm, and that was a place of protection. Now, so I guess leading up to the point is, prior to the last 10 years, we were always told, get in your basement and go to the southwest corner of the basement. Now we're not being told that. I don't know what we're being told. Probably hide under the steps coming down the basement.
That's exactly right. It is important to get to the basement if you have one. Get to the basement, get under the stairwell, get underneath a desk, a workbench, get underneath something, because when a tornado hits that house, all the debris is going to cascade down into the basement. And so it's important to be protected from that debris when it falls down on you. And it's going to fall in the southwest corner, northwest corner, whatever corner that tornado is coming from, or sometimes the winds are going in reverse direction. You're on the back side of that tornado, and the winds might get blown and blow everything into the southwest corner. So we don't want people thinking about the southwest corner. That's not what we want. Instead, it's most important for people to realize, get underneath a desk, under a workbench, under a bed, under a stairwell, underneath something, so that they can be protected from all that debris.
So the debris could come in many forms. I remember that we had one of our neighbors about a block and a half away who was killed in that tornado. Mm-hmm. We had another man who was a survivor. He was in his basement, and he was in the southwest corner, and his hot water heater exploded. And the next day, he had some real bad burns. Mm-hmm. So things like that do happen. We don't think of that too often. But, a hot water heater exploded in his basement.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And so there are all these things to consider. Hot water heater, or do you have shelves in the basement and they're going to tip over right on top of you? That's where it's important that you get underneath something where you'll be protected.
In other words, have a plan. Know what, and everyone in the family needs to know what the plan is.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right.
We're talking about speed. I mean, these things, as we know, could happen instantaneously.
Yeah, and that, just having a plan is so important, whether it's any disaster. It could be floods, it could be something man-made. It's important to have a plan regardless of what that is.
In today's market, and with all of the technology that we do have and didn't have then, are we in a better position to avoid injuries to our people? I mean, we've got the communications. Um, is there a forewarning of any kind? Is there? I guess I'm probing for something like a national emergency thing that could be predicted accurately enough so that you could say, on X day we better watch it.
Yeah. Well, we're still, you know, we've learned a lot,
Yeah.
but there is so much yet to be learned. You know, if we think that we know everything there is to know about tornadoes and storms, we're just fooling ourselves. And so it would be nice to think that and say that 2 days from now at 4 p.m., everybody set your watch, we'll have a tornado come through and schedule. It'd be nice to do that, but we just can't. We just don't know enough about storms. And so,
yeah, and I imagine the near misses, you know, the storms that are not quite tornadoes, or where there are tornadoes, but they're not found, they're not diagnosed. Farmland.
Yeah, and
how many tornadoes drop down on vacant farmland?
Yeah, it used to be in the old days that a tornado went in the record books only if it hit something and people found out about it. Nowadays, with all the video cameras and people watching, a tornado can touch down in the middle of a field, not do anything really, and it gets put into the books as a tornado. And so it kind of looks like there are a lot more tornadoes nowadays, but in reality there are just a lot more people out there watching.
Plus it's all the publicity that they're getting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, well, I tell you what, Todd, I'm going to let you talk to Don Hodges, who's with us today, and Don was the mayor of Mounds View when the tornado hit, and we like to think that it wasn't, it's identified very often as the Fridley tornado, but we think there was probably as much damage in Mounds View as there was in Fridley. And I know there were more people killed in Mounds View than anywhere else.
Yeah.
I think 6 or 8 people.
And I tend to think of them erroneously somewhat as the Twin Cities tornadoes, but some of the beginning tornadoes were southwest of the Twin Cities, you know, south of Waconia and Green Isle, where some of the first tornadoes touched down. And that really wasn't considered part of the metropolitan area at the time. And so folks down there probably think that that tornadoes is being mischaracterized. But
is it fair to say that those tornadoes were some of the worst that ever hit this area, if not the worst?
Yeah, I'd say the tornadoes in 1965 were some of the worst to ever hit Minnesota. We've had some other terrible tornadoes, you know, going back into the 1800s even. One that killed dozens and dozens of people up in Sauk Rapids near St. Cloud. A storm that flipped over a boat and you had 100 people die on Lake Pepin back in the late 1800s. More recently you had the 1967 tornadoes that hit southeast Minnesota with 12 fatalities. That was on April 30th of 67. 1968 you had the Tracy tornado, 9 fatalities in Tracy. 1969 the Outing tornadoes, a bunch of tornadoes, really central into northeast Minnesota's worst tornado outbreak ever. And that was in 1969. And then in 1992 you had 27 tornadoes in one day, southwest into central Minnesota. 1998, you had Comfrey and St. Peter getting clobbered. So we've had a whole host of tornadoes over the years. The 1965 tornadoes were definitely the worst to hit the Twin Cities.
So the one thing we can agree on is that they're unpredictable.
They are so tough to really forecast ahead of time. You know, a lot of tornadoes you can get good warning out. Many tornadoes will have anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes of notice that it's touched down and it's heading your way. A few you'll even get half an hour of warning. But then there are a few others that show us that we still don't know everything to know there is about tornadoes, and they touch down and there's no warning. You know, that happened in the case of Rogers. There are still going to be tornadoes that touch down that we don't just flat out don't know enough about yet. So the researchers, the forecasters, were constantly trying to learn more and more about storms. But it's going to be a long day, I think, or a long time before we get every single tornado with a warning.
Well, Todd, nice chatting with you.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn you over to Don Hodges, and we'll take a little break here. And
You know, here we are at like 6 p.m. And so I can look at these nowadays and I can get a general sense of the shape of some of these, and so I would pinpoint, for example, that one. But this is really difficult to really interpret nowadays because there's no distance scale that I can figure out. And
where was that originally shot? I mean, how
From-
do you get that picture? You're shooting with a camera from the ground or from above the storm?
well, no, actually, this is the radar picture. The thing would do a sweep around, and we had a piece of equipment that was mimicking what the radar operator was looking at. So this second piece of equipment, instead of a radar operator looking at it, had a camera fixed above it. And every couple of minutes it would take another picture. And so, because the sweep would light up, then the camera could take its picture and you could actually get this. So these are, those are the actual radar pictures, and you can see a clock is here in the upper right, and it's MSP, Minneapolis-St. Paul radar in 1965, and so there are a whole bunch of these radar pictures. And now here we have the one from from 6:30 p.m. and this particular storm especially looks suspicious. You know, if I were, looking at this back in 1965, I'd probably be on the phone to the sheriff or somebody trying to find out if there's a tornado with that.
Pleased to meet you there, Todd.
Pleased to meet you as well.
You come down here to the weather service there. I was just asked if I would fill in here a little bit, so being the mayor down there, or up in Mounds View, I should say, area during that 65 tornado, and kind of woke me up. I was fairly young at that time, and a lot of things happened. But I was wondering, for me anyway, when I came out, we had a scout meeting from this church, and then all of a sudden the sky, they said tornadoes popping around all over. You see this big dark tornado coming out of Fridley and all of us Hill for our basement. We just took off for the basements. And I always wondered, back there, they used to say scientists didn't really know how to explain the tornado. And I think one time a weatherman said to me something about up about 6,000 feet you have a storm coming in like the Dakotas and stuff, a thunderstorm, and then from the southwest you have air coming in, but it's way up about 6,000 feet. And it just churns or something and then builds up a rotation. I don't know, is that true? Since those days in the 60s, I figured they probably had a lot more science to it.
Well, it's interesting. Some of the basics that were thought to be true in the 60s still are true. The basic idea of having winds up at 10 or 20,000 feet from one direction and down near the ground at a different direction, that's still very much true. That's the type of thing you need to have the really big time and serious tornadoes. However, some of the things we've learned in the years since, there are a lot of times when you get those kind of winds. There are a lot of times when storms develop in that scenario. How come you only get a few of them that produce tornadoes? Those are some of the questions that are being looked at by the researchers nowadays, and they're coming closer and closer to an answer, but they're still a long way away. So there's still a lot of things we don't know about tornadoes, but there are some basics that are pretty pretty
That is
still
pretty
true.
And it
Yeah.
starts that turning and
Yeah, yeah.
twist. And I think back in those days they told me it could go up as much as 200 miles an hour.
Yeah. And it's a real mystery. Sometimes you can have the winds in the whole state, kind of like this. You get one storm that produces a tornado and another one 20 miles away not producing a tornado. What's the difference? You know, the general atmosphere is like that, but so those are some of the things that are being learned, and radar is a great help for that. But and we'll look at all sorts of computer maps and try to get a sense of whether we think there's a good chance for tornadoes. Sometimes there is, and none will pan out. Other times we think there's a good chance at tornadoes, and we'll send out all the outlooks to give people a heads up, and then we do get tornadoes. So, you know, there's still some uncertainty there.
Now I noticed you as the, you know, being warning and weather and all that, and I noticed all your equipment here and stuff, how to build up. You have a better handle on it today than we used to have of determining whether, I think we got ours over the radio yet in 65 there, what was going on.
Yeah.
Somebody ran into this scout meeting we were having at the church and told us we better cut our meeting short because there's supposed to be a half a dozen tornadoes bouncing around the city. So all of us, you know, hustle home, headed for our basements. I was wondering, now I see you have all this equipment here back of you, and I was looking at your telephones and I see you got a red one, like you can contact a lot of people. And red always sounds emergency to me, like a fireman or what have you.
Sure.
And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about your building up. You got a better handle on how do you figure to give out your warnings.
One of the most important things, we can have all this technology, and we can look at all the computer and radar and everything else. But if you don't have a good way of communicating the threat, it's pointless. You know, it's the whole idea of a tree falling in a forest. So we have to make sure that we have good ways of getting word out to the public. And so when we decide that there's a weather warning that we need to issue, or if we hear about something from one of the weather spotters, then we can get on this phone here, it's this beige phone, we can talk directly with the state patrol and get the word out to law enforcement that way. The red and the black phones are hotlines to the TV stations. Make sure that the stations know about that so that they can pass the word along. What I'm holding here, or what we've got here, this is a weather radio. And these are really neat things because we operate our own radio station. And if there's a weather warning, people can buy these in the store. And any store that sells radios, people can buy them. And when we issue a weather warning, it'll sound off like that. And alert you to the storm that's coming your way. So there you've got it right in your house. It's almost like the smoke detector, but for storms. And you can buy those in radio stores. It'll sound off just for your own area. You can actually, in this one, this is a little bit older model, but I can punch in a various code such that only warnings for Ramsey County sound off, or maybe just Anoka. And by doing that, I'm not alerted in the middle of the night for a storm way over in Wisconsin or up in Duluth, And then you get mad at the radio for a storm 100 miles away and you turn it off. And that's even worse because now you might not hear that storm warning that's coming your way. So communication of warnings is so important. You know, if you don't get the word out, what good is it? And of course nowadays, weather radios are wonderful, but a lot of people have pagers and Blackberries and they can get the warning on their cell phone. There's so much more technology nowadays where people can get the warning. The idea of relying on an outdoor warning siren is really not all that great because sirens don't tell you what they're sounding for. Getting the warning over one of these or via your cell phone or pager or computer or whatever there you can get a sense exactly what that warning is all about. Sirens are great, but they don't tell you why they're sounding, and not only that, but you are dependent on being near an open window. You know, they
at night at home you can't hear
yeah.
really inside sometimes.
You-
You got the city
yeah.
sirens that go, but
yeah, you can't have a siren every 6 blocks.
air conditioning going and what have you nowadays.
You've got air conditioning going, maybe the dishwasher is running, maybe you're sound asleep. Maybe the wind is blowing that sound of the siren off in a different direction. That happens sometimes as well. So sirens are fine, but you need more than one way to get a warning.
Well, that's great. I think I can see that radio is really important there.
Yeah, and those you can have in your home. I know some folks have several. I have 2, and so making sure that I have a backup in case the first one fails.
I was going to ask you, Todd, another question is that when I was a kid, I know I'd hear, a tornado off somewhere in Iowa or somewhere in Nebraska, Oklahoma all the time. And I always thought Minnesota and you'd get north, we're, different climate. But I guess we have had our tornadoes over the years. We just didn't realize when we were growing up here in Minnesota area that it's increased, hasn't it, more so? Or is it just because with all your communication, we're more aware of it?
Yeah, that's really it.
Back in the, I wanted to say,
Yeah.
older times, back in the
Yeah.
time we didn't have the radio on, or you didn't.
Yeah, if you look at it, total numbers of tornadoes have increased dramatically, but that's because a lot more people are out there watching. Back in the 1950s, Minnesota averaged maybe 5 or 6 tornadoes a year, but those were the 5 or 6 that really did devastating damage. In the 60s, the averages jumped up to about 15 or 18, and that held true through the 70s and 80s. But you get into the 90s and the averages jumped way up, but the number of really destructive tornadoes stayed the same. And so it's just people are out there noticing a lot more of these brief touchdowns out in an open field or over the lake or something like that. The really devastating tornadoes have pretty much stayed about the same through the years.
That's just like when I was mayor back in '65, Mounds View, the center of the community still had a farm, which is all built up now. When I went through there, I suppose probably had a little better than a third of the population than that you'd have today. So much more open area to what,
Sure.
trees down and stuff, and yet we still had, I think, almost a half a dozen people just in our area there, fellow trying to drive home up the highway, and all of us try to do things that I shouldn't do.
I mean, you look at if the same storm system and the same number of tornadoes hit and went over the same area, despite people knowing a lot more and despite all the great communication, I worry that there'd be a lot more fatalities just because of people getting caught in rush hour, and there are a lot more folks, development, as you say, a lot less open land. So on one hand, we could have a lot more fatalities because of a lot more people being out driving and development and so on. On the other hand, a lot more communication. People are a lot more aware of the tornadoes coming their way. So I'm not sure what would happen if we were to get those today.
And the sound when we went out and visited some of the people in our communities, so many of them would say it sounded like a freight train coming down when they were in their basements, and a lot of these people had totally lost their homes, just wiped them right off of I think it was something like 38 of them, just like a basement was all that was left.
Yeah.
And all told, they're just in our little community. When it went down, it went right over one of those new home areas that was built probably right after the Second World War. And just wiped out a whole block long.
And advance notice is so important because you'll have, whether people are driving or whether they live in a mobile home park or they're out jogging or they're playing softball or some of the newer homes don't have basements nowadays. One of the ideas is you can actually look into building a safe room in your house. And these are kind of hardened little structures. They are like a walk-in closet almost, but they're reinforced very, very well. And a safe room can withstand some of these devastating tornadoes, whereas the rest of the house may wind up getting blown away. So that's something to look into if you want to retrofit your house or you're going to be building a new one.
Just really surprising. I know I found one lady has an A-frame. I thought, what in the world, you know, if you go, you know, somewhere to a shelter, and they do designate in the communities, I guess, not one, but she said she puts her kids in the bathtub.
Yeah, yeah. Some folks do that because if you think about it, the bathtub is a pretty solid structure, and you've got all the plumbing, you know, the pipes around to help add a little bit of stability in and around the bathroom. And so it's just a matter of covering yourself up with blankets or a real skinny mattress. I don't know too many people that can lug a huge mattress in seconds, but you know, blankets, pillows, that sort of thing. Cover yourself up that way.
I was just thinking back in '65 when I was driving home from work, it was hot and salty when them days your t-shirt would stick to you and all that. And I was wondering, you know, as a weather person, does that indicate a little bit of a potential for bad weather, that type of weather for us?
Yeah.
It's like the south, what do you call it, Louisiana weather moved up north.
Yeah, yeah, the real steamy, humid weather. But a lot of times that does indicate there might be some storms, but it really just sets the stage. You can have a terribly hot and humid day and nothing happens because you need some of the other things going on in the atmosphere to also cooperate. And you have to have it cold enough up at 10 and 20,000 feet. You have to have maybe a cold front coming through or a warm front to help set things off. So
right after that, every time I get hot, humid weather, my poor heart was just worried you know, we're going to have another tornado.
Yeah.
You just dread the idea of something like that. It's something that it's nature that we can't control but live with.
Yeah,
as best we can.
It is. And so it's just a matter of knowing what storms are out there, being aware of the warnings, paying attention. I mean, the vast majority of the time, we'll have a pretty good handle on the idea of severe weather being possible. So that gives people a heads up. So, you know, some of my advice is just pay attention to the forecast. If we think it's going to be severe, we'll mention that. And we'll put that out in the forecast, and then all the broadcasters should be relaying at least a little bit of that so that people have a heads up that there could be severe weather later on in the day, so that they have a plan, can figure out what to do.
Well, I just want to thank you for your time and stuff like that. I think that's enough, you know, for the time that you've given us.
Yeah.
I sure appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Don Hodges and I are at City Hall. I'm Jerry Skelly, and our topic is about the 1965, referred to very often as the Fridley tornado of 1965. But that tornado hit Mounds View as hard as it did Fridley and many of the other adjacent cities. It rolled in from the west, from Chanhassen, Minnetonka area. There were 6 funnels that touched the ground. And Don Hodges at that time, was the mayor of Mounds View. This is 1965. And that was a few years ago, Don.
Yes, it was. I think it was a few years ago.
And you had a lot to do, and what you could do is kind of tell us how you felt when you realized that these tornadoes were touching down all over the north side of the city of Minneapolis, and from all the way from Minnetonka out here to Mounds View.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock, like all of us, when we saw it coming from the Fridley area here in Mounds View, headed for our basements. And then afterwards you found out that it had hit here in Mounds View, and of course we could hear it roar by also. But we ran around trying to get a hold of people and this and that, and there was no telephones, so all you could do was just drive over to your City Hall at that time.
How were the warnings? I suppose it's difficult to compare them to today's new technology and our understanding of meteorology. What were your thoughts? You were a young mayor of the city. How many months had you been in office?
I started out in July of 1959, filling in there as the mayor, and for Reuben Ochterkirk, and then I just filled in for his time in '59 and ran for office, and that's how I got started. Yeah.
And then you were in office from '59 till into the tornado year, then '65.
Right. Yep.
What were your first thoughts? Did you have? I know you worked with civil defense when you were working for the state of Minnesota, and that gave you a little bit of background, maybe for what you had to do at that time.
It did help. I had taken some schooling on emergency management and stuff over in Battle Creek, Michigan, and I had just gotten started real well with the program with the state and the University of Minnesota. They called civil defense education. It's more along those lines of radiological stuff and sheltering. And many of the youngsters would remember the old duck and cover. We were pushing that kind of stuff back then in the 60s. But right away, you want to do something, and your hands were tied. And like I say, telephone stuff on work, we rushed over here to the City Hall. And from there, I was very fortunate that there was a New Brighton civil defense person drove in, and he had a radio and everything. I think his name was Ingram. And he drove me all around and helped me out. And we got a hold of Dick Myers, our city attorney, and brought everybody in here to the City Hall and worked out from here. And we got a hold of the state, and they brought out the state guard. Even Carl Rovog came along that night, and I know late at night he was out there taking a look at the tornado area right along with us, and along with the guard units.
And then I suppose you had, it seems that from what I can remember, and I lived in Mounds View at the time as well, the WCCO radio kept a pretty good, I'm not sure all the radio stations did, but we were kind of geared to WCCO at the time. And I would imagine you guys must have switched stations, or did you hang on to WCCO for most of your updated information?
It seems to me we did at first, the radio, and we had down in the basement and stuff listening and that. But when I got over here, everybody would just seem to go in all directions. We only had a few policemen, and they were running in all directions, taking people to hospitals and stuff. And the city council people came over and went right through the area, which was really hit heavy. It was over in Hillview and the Lois Drive Knollwood area there of Pinewood. And the city councilman went house to house and checking out families and seeing to get them, off to the hospital and stuff. Then later on, we had to find out for families where they were at, which hospitals were people taken, because it was just kind of helter-skelter, getting people first to the medical attention they needed. And we had a wonderful city council at that time. There was Chuck LeVake, and who lived over in the area, and Jerry Blanchard, and those fellas got right out there and started helping the people right away. So we were very fortunate.
So the people that were injured had a way to. They were taken to the hospital, mostly a Unity Hospital here in this area. Was that the Red Cross? Were they involved at that time also?
Yeah, the everything was set up. Then the next day and stuff. Then when Red Cross, Salvation Army brought in one of those vehicles and had sandwiches for the people. We had to cordon off the area and make people come to our city hall for passes to get into their property to look for their things, so that you wouldn't have all kinds of people out looking around. The state brought over a vehicle that cleaned the roads for us, for nails and all that kind of stuff, so that you could get in and out of the area. And it was just kind of we were really working from a seat of our pants. You didn't really have a plan for these kind of things. So, but everybody just seemed like pitched in, and it slowly we just worked at it, and the jobs were getting done.
I remember the newspapers at the time, and the cities themselves put out pictorials of what happened, and in almost every case where they took pictures, it looked like a real battleground, almost total destruction in some areas.
It did. It really looked like a war zone almost, like a big bomb went off. It just took everything and then came into Mounds View, you know, from the southwest out of Fridley, and it cut right across Mounds View, and where the Methodist church is, it damaged that church there, and then it really hit down hard on that Hillview Road and Lois Drive, Knollwood area, and went out northeast. So we were very fortunate at that time. Our community wasn't filled like it is today. Across the road over here where the theater and stuff, that was all woods in those days. But still, it did a lot of damage and kept us pretty busy there for quite a while.
Was there any specific thoughts running through your mind at that time as you realized you had been mayor since '59, and all of a sudden here it is 1965, and this huge storm came rolling into the area, and it had to be a shocker.
Yeah, it was. You're just kind of, like I say, flabbergasted more or less, and where do I start, what do I do? And it was just kind of pieced together with a lot of help from really a lot of nice people. When I telling you about the civil defense director from New Brighton being here and had a car radio so we could get we got a hold of Dick Myers, our city attorney, and our law enforcement people, of course, were out working and doing their thing, getting people out of there and stuff. But that helped after we got the attorney here and stuff. He helped us try to organize and help sit down and, you know, take one thing at a time, one step at a time, because we were all kind of shook up, you know, how you're, where do I start next?
Yes. Don, you had said that Karl Rollvag was the governor at that time, and did he come right to the city hall here and you addressed him at any point, or did he just proclaim a mandate that...
He came out, Karl Rollvag came out with the guard unit and looked over the disaster areas, and I thought that was really something for a governor to come out like that. He wanted to see what was going on firsthand, and so...
Did he come out the next morning or that night? Or?
That evening, right when the National Guard came out, and he came out right with them. He wanted to see what was going on, and that really was a lift, you know, just to have somebody like that interested in what was going on in the area. And being that, you know, there was so much all over the Twin City area,
Yes.
and have him come through. And so what happened to us too is a lot of it that night was basically just getting the people out and closing up the areas, you know, and then the next day making people come through the city hall, you know, to go into the area. And then where do you put the vehicles, and when you start your cleanup and all that kind of stuff. Right behind the city hall where you see the water tower, that's where we pulled a lot of the vehicles and cars. There was just big piles of vehicles over there. And then we had set up a team of people to go through and made a list of the homes that were totally destroyed and those, you know, were just damaged. What happened to us, right away the next day, your insurance people come in and they want to settle up for a couple $1,000s. And we didn't want this to happen, so called down to the commissioner, insurance commissioner, and he told us we could keep them out and that until we went through and checked all the homes to see what the damages were, so make sure that people got a fair thing on their homes. And I think that was really nice too, a deal that the commissioner there in the state said we could do this. Yeah.
So and your whole staff was very active in doing what they had to do, particularly on that night and the day after, because there was so much involved. I have a little note here that says that Unity Hospital had only 3 doctors on call that night of the tornado, and then it said shortly after the beginning of the tornadoes that hit down, there were 53 doctors at Unity Hospital, and the next morning, there were 53 doctors. They had 145 beds there, and they were all filled, and they had to add on several more places to put injured people. So that's quite a statistic for.
Yeah, they're loaded up, and then of course they had the people, from the Fridley area, Spring Lake Park. A lot of ours even went down towards the St. Paul area, and so we had to take them all over. Yeah.
And then there were 6 tornadoes. Does that sound about right? From what I've been able to.
There was 6 different ones that were moving around our.
And the one that really hit Mounds View was the 6th tornado.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. In other words, the last of the group of tornadoes, and that there were more people killed in Mounds View than any of the other cities that it hit.
That's what I understand.
I believe it was 6. The statistic that I looked at said six people were killed in Mounds View, many injured, of course.
We had, like I was saying, one octaker, I think his name was Walter, lived over
yes.
Knollwood area there. And
it was the Tom Thumb store there, I believe.
First came in by the
Tom Thumb store at Knollwood and H2.
Yeah, by that Messiah Church
yes.
there. Their roof was shooken up a little bit, and then it came across. And we were very fortunate that was all woods then, where our city park is now.
Yes.
It was woods, so we were fortunate there. And then, of course, like I said, the Methodist church here got damaged and then on over. So we were very fortunate that there wasn't more damage that when it went down over there in that Pinewood area. It pretty much kept us in that one area during the whole time trying to clean up and afterwards to get the things squared away.
So this had to be one of the most arduous and critical issues that you had as a mayor.
Yes, it sure was. About the first 3 days, it seemed like I didn't even sleep. Most of us, we were up here trying to figure out what was the next thing to do, and trying to find homes for people. There was a Jerry Christensen that was working over in Washington at the time, I think with Joe Carth, who was our representative at the time. Sent him over, and he helped us get homes that weren't being used, and under a program there, so people would have places to live, and then of course they put them up wherever they could find, with relatives and what have you. That was a big thing too. Where do you do with the people for the time being? And so we got a lot of help from our federal people in that respect.
How long did the National Guard stay in the city?
It must have been at least 3 or 4 days at least that the guard unit was here. Of course, those people had to get back to their jobs too, and then we got organized within about a week, and things got pretty well set in. Then I believe they were gone after that.
We lost our electric, I know, for some time.
Yeah, telephones, electric, things like that. In other areas besides just the Pinewood area where it hit, and so that was what was really tough too, communicating and getting the help you did need.
It was my recollection of it is there was so much debris that was blown in from way out in the western part of the area, Minnetonka, Shakopee, Fridley, everything you can think of. Roof tile, glass from windows. I think the people who didn't have any damage were very lucky. Any real physical damage. And
yes, one of the things that we got material back as far as White Bear, letters and different things they found of people. And then we opened up our warming house and stuff, let people use those to store some of their stuff in. That was on our ice rinks at that time. And it was tough on the people, finding their stuff, digging through all that stuff because it blew so far. There was kind of right at the end of the Pinewood area there, Lois Drive, was a big swamp. And one of the fellows that lived over there said he was on Damport. Next thing you know, he was picking himself up over in the swamp. And he was hurt somewhat, but he lived through it. And that's just hard to believe that a guy could, be blown that far without getting all beat up and really hurt. And I think some of them people, maybe we could check out and see if some of them people are still living there, and maybe could have a chance to talk to those people. Probably be a...
Well, thank you, thank you very much, Don, for all that information, and we'll be talking some more. And we want to take another look at all the things that happened that we can find at that time. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. My name is Don Hodges, and I was asked if I would continue a program on the May 6th, 1965 tornado that hit Mounds View in the Fridley and Spring Lake Park area. And I am going to ask these people here that are with us today, they lived here at the time, and there's quite a few of them that still live here, and ask them what happened and their story, and I'll just introduce them as we go around here. I have here to my right is Dave Burg, and next to him is Don Madsen, and his wife Judy, and Dave's wife Sherley, and Don Rossbach. Rossbach? Bach. Oh.
No Kate.
Okay. We got that thing now.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're here today just to ask them the questions and discuss and just kind of go through where were you and what happened, and fill us in on how you felt and things that happened. I'm going to start right out here. And Dave, would you want to start out there?
Don.
I mean Don. I was going to say Dave, Don. Don, would you want to start out there and
Sure.
and tell where were you or what happened that night for you? Were you ready for it? You hear radio, or how did you get the warning?
We just had a small little battery-operated radio that the oldest daughter had. We were listening to that. I came home from work, and my wife right away told me, in the basement. And I thought, in the basement for what, And so she said, the storm's all around. Been out by Minnetonka, they've been Spring Park, and then they were heading this way. And so she forced me into the basement so that I wasn't going to get anything to eat, so forget about it. You're going to be in the basement, see? And so I went down there reluctantly, but the radio kept building it up more and more, so it sounded more and more like it really was coming. And then it was hitting Fridley, and then Spring Lake Park, and it was hard to believe, but then when it finally did come, we really knew it was coming. And you were glad your wife told you to go down there or you wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm going to thank you, Don, there on that point. I was wondering, people, hearing it on radio, or what, did the sirens go off over here?
The sirens didn't work. They said later that a bird had built its nest in our siren out there, so we had no siren. If it weren't for CCO radio, we wouldn't have had no warning at all.
Okay, and then looking at the area, it looked just like everything was wiped out from the corner down here.
Oh, yeah, from the woods.
Where Buck's home, where Georgia is.
Beyond,
and it went right on through.
Whole thing.
And what I was wondering, maybe Shirley, you could fill us in, how did you get down the basement and how did you get out? Were you here at home at the time?
Yes, I was home, and I got the children home into the house, and we were listening to the radio also. And finally we went down the basement, and my husband Dave refused to go down. He was painting and he wanted to finish that. And he kept on and painting, and I kept urging him to come down. Finally I almost yelled at him, "You've got to get down here." So he finally came down, and he just got to the bottom step, and the lights all went out, and the tornado went through. So
What did that sound like? Everybody says a train or something, or what?
it didn't to
No,
me.
not
but
to me. It
was-
sounded like 1,000 carpenters pulling nails.
Oh,
Because you hear the ripping of
Yeah.
the crowbar, of nails pulling out.
Oh.
I didn't hear no train noise to me.
Yeah.
I figured in the years that I always hear them always say train, they must have been in a small tornado.
Yeah, I hear that.
Because this one
Everybody says
here
the train
really
time.
went through.
Yeah.
I remember afterwards when it had gone through that everything was falling into place.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
crumbling, and our
Did you
stairway
have
was
your
gone.
children at home here then? Did you
Yeah.
get them?
Oh, yeah.
We had 3 kids, and
Got
they
them in
were
the
down in the
basement?
basement. I had my arms around them like this, and something
Yeah.
hit me on the back.
We took winter coats and threw on top of the kids, and then
On
we
top
laid
of
on
the
top
kids.
of the kids
Oh, yeah.
there.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
great.
But the funny part, strange thing about it was, after the tornado went through, Buck next door, he comes over to see how we are. I leave my house and come over to see how they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were all hauling back
Trying
and
to
forth.
check out each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, let's move on here a second to Judy there. You can tell, were you at home at the time when the tornado came through?
Oh yes, we were home.
You were there.
Yeah,
And did you have kids too there at
yeah,
home?
we had 3 kids, and this kid was the last one to get down.
He was the last one, huh?
And the kids were screaming and hollering at him to get down here.
Yeah.
And
Maybe you wanted to take pictures.
Gary gave me.
Jerry said, yeah, he did. He came up to get him.
Well, I was looking out.
Stay up, too.
I kept looking out the basement window there because the staircase came down there. I had the kids on the floor. And I'm looking out, and all of a sudden I heard it was right there. I says, it is here. As I turned around, something came through the window and hit me in the head, and I
Wow.
dropped on the kids.
We can move on here. Don, did you want to say something here about how did you get out of it, or?
Well, when
Did
I
you-
got home from work that night, I stopped the car. I had a new car, and I had a little squeak in it. So I stopped and fixed that. And then when I got home, they told me, get in the basement. Well, I was a dummy. I stayed upstairs. And then my boy come up and he said, if you don't go in the basement, I'm not either. So when I was going down the steps, the house was going.
The house is going. You were lucky then, yeah.
And then when I come up the steps, they said, watch that wire. So that was the first thing that hit me was the electric wire.
Uh-oh.
That was out then. So then I started to look around the neighborhood a little bit. And my neighbors, they couldn't get out because all the junk was over their house. So I had to dig them out.
It was all piled up right
Yeah.
behind.
Right there.
All piled up.
All the stuff went right on top
Yeah.
of their house, just. Then
Dave,
my,
I understand you were painting, you say? Did you
Yes,
quit,
I was
or did
painting.
you wait to see the tornado first?
I wanted to get the job done, but I kept running to the back entrance to look out,
Yeah.
and it was kind of blowing, like, not too much, but all of a sudden it hailed. And
Yeah.
I remember my mother telling me she went through the same thing, and after it hailed, it got real quiet.
Yeah.
And the birds were flying around, they were all mixed up.
Yeah.
So I decided, she kept yelling at me, so I thought, well, I better go down. The roller is still flying someplace out here east here.
Somewhere it's
someplace.
still going.
but the-
Anyway, I got halfway down, of course, like she said, and
But
the
the-
lights went out and the whole thing went off.
Business went.
The whole house, right off the foundation.
Yeah.
But the funny part about it was before that tornado, everything was perfectly still.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Oh, it
wouldn't see a
was.
bird
That's
around
the way-
or
yeah,
nothing.
uh-huh.
Green sky.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
the way it
green
was.
sky.
That's what I was trying to remember today when they had the tornado warnings out again
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, it was hot and sultry that
Oh,
day.
Oh, it was
Oh, yeah.
terrible.
And then it started raining around supper time, it seems to me. And then
Oh,
I
yeah.
went to a scout meeting over, they call it Spring Lake Park Lutheran Church at that time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's Compassion Center or something now. They're right off of Highway 10. And they chased us all out of there because they said, there was a half a dozen cells,
Mm-hmm.
tens
Yeah.
of tornadoes in our area.
Yeah.
And so we had to break up our meeting, I remember. And I just got home and I see the black tornado coming out of
Yeah.
Fridley, and that's when we had to go to the basement. I think I beat my wife down there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what the humidity
Yeah.
or dew points was, but
Oh,
I
it was
drove
terribly
truck
hot.
and
Yeah.
all of the
Humid.
warehouses, their floors were wet.
Yeah.
And I'd come home and I thought that was awfully strange.
Yeah.
To be that wet.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we are.
Well, now the next day, or well, let's say that evening, afterwards. Now you folks, you were going around checking on each other, your neighbors, to see how they were, and I know I came with one of the civil defense fellas from New Brighton named Ingram, I think his name was, and he had a vehicle. We couldn't even hardly get in here, and it was such a mess. And the police were sheriff's cars, our police cars, squad cars. We were just running people to any hospital. We weren't sure which family was, you know, was who. We
Well,
just
some of
run
the
them
guys
out.
down the block, they weren't home from work yet.
Yeah.
You know, they got home later. So they come here and see the house come up.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering, how you people worked it out. You know, you were right here. Were any of you hurt or injured that had to go to the hospital or anything?
No.
By getting in that basement did the job, huh?
Did the job being down there.
I had a big black and blue mark on my back.
I just got
I don't
sore in the back of the head. I went to a chiropractor frequently, and he gave me several adjustments that are free.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Don thought that
I thought he
Rossbach
was
thought
gone.
I had gone with it because he could see through
I could
his
see it from the
basement
window
window
there.
me in the doorway.
Painting up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh man.
And he thought
he's
for
gone.
sure I had gone with it. And he
Yeah.
called for me after I started crawling out.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have no way to get out of the basement.
No, the steps was pulled way
Yeah.
off. So
Yeah, I
but they did
remember-
get out though.
The next day, you know, like I said, police people were hauling people to
Yeah.
the hospitals from here to St. Paul and
All
up
over.
to Anoka. There was a Mercy Hospital, and
And all the road was, you know,
Yeah.
full of debris.
so we had to take
Yeah.
inventory. I remember the next morning to find out where everybody was at.
Sure.
Yeah.
The phone rang that night. My dad called and says, I hear there's warning storms out your way. I says, yeah. I says, but there's too much lightning flashing. I said, I'm not going to talk on the phone. And then the next time I called, somebody gave me a ride down to Midwest Motor Freight down in Roseville. And I called him from there and told him the house is gone. And he says, what?
Well, that's what I understand too. That
But this guy down the street, that Ray Young,
Yeah.
he got out
Yeah.
of the shower, and then he was, was going to get dressed. Well, he had his robe on. Before he knew it, he was down in the swamp.
Yeah.
He was airborne, but he lived
That's
through
right,
it.
he was. Yeah.
That was kind of a miracle, I guess.
And then I understand Canker boys that lived on the other side of Bucks down
Yep.
here, 3 houses down,
Yeah.
which starts Hillview Road there.
Right.
And those boys were in bed upstairs,
Yeah.
and
Boy.
they landed on the front yard, and I don't know if they were hurt or anything.
I don't think they were hurt.
Doesn't
mother
seem like
was.
there were.
She got a broken back.
She got a broken back, and
Right.
but the boys were all right. And
The boys were all right.
those stories are hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, and like
Lucky.
you
Yeah, that's
say,
a
the
miracle,
twins,
you know.
Yeah.
they blew away completely and just sat down.
Yeah, I went through, and you people probably helped me out there too. Here in the area, I figure there's 4 deaths that you had here. Abram,
5, should be 5.
was there, and Magnuson child,
Yeah.
and
little boy.
there was Mrs. Abram, wasn't it? Abramson
two-
and
and
2 children.
Well, that Magnuson, that one was killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beam fell on
Oh.
him. If he,
So
it would have
really,
been all
was,
right if that beam
There was
wouldn't
one
have
dead
fell
on
on
the
him.
street though.
Yeah. So when you look at that picture and of that storm, it's amazing that there wasn't more.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Well, I thought when I got out of the house, I thought we were the only ones alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
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 But serving on the city council, many of you probably remember too, it was tough the next day coming through and stuff. We had insurance people coming through right away wanting to settle up. We had to call the commissioner, insurance commissioner in the state, and give us permission to keep everybody out. Remember, we set up a pass system trying to keep everybody out,
Yeah.
but there was still a lot of people that took
Well,
things
the
that shouldn't have
company,
been there.
the
Yeah.
company came in to clean up. They took a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
They ended up with it down here by the Mermaid, but they
Yeah.
didn't prosecute it. They took a lot of the stuff.
Did they, that outfit that cleaned up?
I forget what they were named.
Yeah.
named.
Yeah, the construction company that did
Yeah,
that.
but otherwise the rest of the stuff I had in the basement, that was all
Mhm.
gone. Somebody came in when I wasn't allowed in and took it all.
Took it all.
Really?
Took everything that was left.
I think it was the same thing with us
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And then of course the oil tank broke, and there was oil all over
Oh,
the floor. So
Oh,
Yeah.
We didn't know if we should save the floor or not, but I said, take it out. I said, it'd be that smell forever.
Yeah.
So
What
start
made you
over.
rebuild here? Did you?
Well,
Your family at home?
you couldn't get a government loan unless you rebuilt on the property.
Oh,
Yeah.
part of it, huh?
That's part of it.
Yeah, you're. I remember Buck's home down there, 2 homes down. That was one of the first ones. And then you came right along too, didn't you? With
Yeah,
your
well,
own?
mine was ahead of hers. But
Yeah.
she
And
talked
then
to
we
the same.
started.
She talked to.
Mhm.
They had the same contractor.
Mhm.
She talked to him and says, "Mine's got to be finished first."
Yeah.
So I didn't say that because mine was up already.
Yeah, we started right away too.
We were back in September.
Yeah, I was in August.
We moved back in so
Yeah.
the kids could go to school here.
Yeah.
Yeah, August I was back.
Yeah, I was just wondering, on a lot of these things are coming back, and going through. You always wonder the things we could have done better, but it happens so fast. What do? You just do what happens the best you can, and
A lot of decisions to make.
yeah. And that getting in the basement, they used to tell us to go to a certain corner, and now I guess they don't tell us to do that anymore.
The corner we went to is not the one they tell us to go to now,
Yeah.
but it worked.
Mhm.
Somebody was telling me at work that to get in your bathtub is a very safe place.
Yeah.
I said we would have been across the street.
You've been
somehow.
down the chair.
Upside down.
Weren't you ever? That bath you'd always remember.
Shirley, how about the guitar of Ron's? That went across the street.
Yeah, that stayed with the upper a story and a half, and the half went down the street.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that half
It
went
went so
down the
low.
street, and that both ends blown out, but everything in there was all intact, even a plate glass mirror, and the instruments that my son played and I played.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Nothing underneath it.
Yeah.
It was just
Right.
like the glass here, right?
Sure.
Nothing underneath it.
Well,
Well,
Yeah.
my 2 cars that I had there, I had that Jeep, the Jeeps there.
No,
They
yeah.
had Chrysler rims on it.
Yeah.
And those have that extra drop part on their rim. There was roofing in between the rim and the tire. Those tires had deflated in the storm, and the roofing was in between them. I had to deflate the tires, take them off the rim to get the shingles out. They
Yeah.
were right inside them.
Unbelievable.
Really? Right in
Yeah,
there.
unbelievable.
Right inside them.
Yeah.
And when I redid my yard out in front, there was a 2x4 that was driven in like this
Yeah.
from the south,
Yeah.
way into the ground.
Oh, my shotgun, that was the barrel first in the ground on the next door.
Yeah.
As the gun was up like this, the barrel was in the ground.
Yeah, all my guns were found somewhere by the mayor or who.
Yeah.
And I picked them up over at the.
Yeah, we had people bring stuff to us, and I think we used the warming houses on our city parks then.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
I
there was a
don't
little
know
old
where I
building
got it.
behind by the water tower. Your stuff, I think we went through and brought over to you.
Yeah, because I had the deer rifles and that.
Yeah.
You had them all over there. I don't know how you found them.
Yeah.
Plus my insurance packet was in
Yeah.
another case.
Yeah.
And you found that.
Yeah, I remember bringing something back
Yeah,
to you.
right.
Yeah, that was hard.
How come
Hard.
you're still not mayor?
Hard.
No. No. But
No.
we had people send stuff to us clear as far as White Bear one time.
Yeah.
Mail and stuff that they found.
That
they thought
landed
it
way
was
over
important.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
They
So
said
this
there was
stuff
stuff that.
went a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still find things in our garden
Oh,
every
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
I found
Yeah.
more this year.
Glass.
Glass and shingles.
Yeah.
I found
Spark
again.
plug. I found a spark plug in the.
Judy had her wristwatch on top of the refrigerator. Well, the refrigerator was, we don't know where that was, but her watch was laying on the floor. So the refrigerator went and the watch was laying there. That was horrible.
Because it didn't take your floor off. Didn't
Yeah.
take.
No, it
the
didn't take your
was
floor
still
off.
there.
Huh?
The floor was still there.
Yeah, the floor was, your floor
Well, our
wasn't
floor
there
was
though.
gone.
Yeah.
Everything.
I remember my rings were.
Yeah, you've got that back.
The net was on the floor.
Don, how long did it take to build your home back again? You
August I got back in.
First home you're back in August,
Back in August, yeah.
and that yeah,
3 months.
May, June, July.
3 months.
Yeah. I didn't,
And he came from St. Paul, the builder. He did 4 houses.
Yeah.
And these two, Bucks and mine, he put on a regular chimney with a flue because that was the St. Paul code.
Yeah.
And then he found out they didn't need that here, so he just put pipes in the back to just a gas pipe.
Oh, yeah. Well, I
Glad
don't know.
he did this.
Have you got any other stories you can think of?
Well, tell about the twins there on the
Oh, they
corner.
blew away, yeah.
They went upstairs to get the twins
And it was shaking.
that were in the crib. So he was going up to get them. Well, the tornado came and took the tornado, the crib, and blew it back in the swamp. And here those two twins were in that crib, and they probably got a few scratches, but the other,
tried to work
lived
the
through it.
father, he got hurt. Him and his daughter, they were just running around. He with the daughter. They finally,
Yeah.
they weren't hurt real bad, but
But the babies were okay.
they made it.
Yeah.
I've got another story too. There was a car over on the corner there that rolled, and it rolled right up to our foundation.
To
And
the
being
window,
that our
yeah.
floor went off, one more roll would have been right on top
Right,
of
on
us.
top of us.
Oh.
Yep.
Very fortunate
We
then,
was-
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, took a long time didn't it to clean up the mess, and then find. How did you find a place to stay? I mean, did you have family around, or how did you take care of your?
My folks were here, so I went to St. Paul. But the first night we went to the apartments on Hillview.
Yeah.
They were open
Everybody
down there.
did.
Yeah.
So
We all went over
we went
there.
down
Yeah.
there. But the very next day, there was tornado warnings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
they-
next
Yeah.
day, there was
Yeah.
tornado warnings.
It was
So
still
we were
unsettled.
out of
Yeah.
here. We
They
got
made
out of
us
here.
move out of here.
You ain't kidding.
We had to get out of
Surely.
here.
Get out of
Yeah.
here. Where did you go?
Shirley, you should.
Well, Mel Lundeen, he was a guy, I don't know, I hitchhiked a ride over and got him and the family. We went over to his place and
Yeah.
stayed the night. And he had water in his basement, that's where we stayed. And we got our feet wet when we went to bed.
Well, I
Anyway,
want to thank you people for coming over.
Yeah.
And Don Rossbach, I just remember your name all these
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good German name.
And Sherley, and Judy, and Don, and Dave.
David.
And sure appreciate you guys taking the
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
tell us your
Well,
story.
good.
And
We have two folks today that were with us in 1965. In fact, all three of us were here in 1965 during the time of the so-called Fridley tornado. We like to think that it's the Mounds View and Fridley tornado. But Bob Aldrich, next to me, the guy in the middle, was the search and rescue chieftain for Fridley during that time. And Don Hodges it was the mayor of Mounds View at the time. He was the young mayor of Mounds View. He's still young, but then he was younger. And so he was the mayor. You know, we talk a lot about it. We read from time to time, read articles about it in the papers. When this happened, and it happened on May 6th, 1965, and when you guys first realized the severity of that tornado, what were your thoughts in the capacity that you worked at that time? Bob, let's hear a few words from you about that.
Well, what we wanted to do, the first thing when we realized that we had been hit, was to try and shut down the amount of traffic that could move through the area so that we could move our emergency response people with a lot more ease and less danger to them. We weren't able to accomplish it to the degree we would like to because of the state highways, and it was hard to get access to people that would shut those down. But for the most part, we were able to close down University and East River Road, and that helped to some extent. But that was a big problem. You know, everybody comes to look-see, and they become part of the problem.
yeah, that night was kind of a shocker. We were at a meeting, at a scout meeting, and I'm not sure, Bob, if all the sirens went off in your town. I didn't hear a siren because we were all in this meeting in a church basement.
They didn't go off in our town because we didn't have them.
Didn't have one. Anyway, I rushed home and stuff, and then you get your own kids, you know, down the basement and stuff, and then the next thing I knew, it sounded like a freight train come out of Fridley, across Mounds View. Well, when I got over here to the city, we didn't have any telephones or nothing, no way to communicate. So there was a civil defense director from New Brighton pulled in, and we used his squad car. So that helped out. And then went over to the site where the tornado hit, which was ours, and on the other side, Nolawood there and stuff. There's a couple of councilmen over there already. One lived in the area. He kind of got them organized, and we're already getting people out. But we had no idea people that want to know where their family was. We were running them to every hospital, in the area, from St. Paul to Fridley to wherever we could find a hospital at that time. So it did take us probably till the next day for us to get organized. You know what I mean, for our center, emergency center, and everything get rolling. I don't know, whereabouts did you fellas have your center at that time?
We operated out of the basement of what was left of the city hall.
Of the city hall. Yeah, we were visiting, about our places where we went and stuff, and where people went. Like I was saying, our police department, different people were run off to the hospitals, and I suppose you had that same thing. But anyway, we're talking about, families and stuff and where they went, and we had a lot of councilmen there that were helping get the people out of the area, and we were trying to run them out to different hospitals in the area, and families would wonder where they were. So we didn't really get organized until the next day, really, where people were. And I suppose, Bob, you had those same things happen to you?
Well, yeah, we at North Memorial at that time was housing an ambulance at the Fridley Fire Station, and we were able to get that thing moving quite rapidly. And then you get you all come emergency responders that come from all over that can really create some huge problems. You mentioned communication. That probably is the biggest problem you'll have in any major catastrophic event, is the ability to be able to communicate with the people that you want to be able to communicate with. At that time, Fridley was dispatched by Hennepin County. The Anoka County system wasn't operating at that time at all. And for us to communicate with some of the emergency response units there, you got into a transmission of a message 4 or 5 times to get it out to the unit you wanted to receive it and to get a response back from them. So those type of things have to be dealt with, but they don't get in place, like you say. For the first 24 hours, you're pretty much in a crisis management type of situation, and then you can settle it down a little bit. We were able to get settled down about 11:30 that evening. We felt that we were pretty comfortable that we had accounted for most of our people, and by then we had transmitted about 290 of them to the hospitals. But by 11:30 we were able to go kind of back off a little bit, drop off some of the units that were out in the field working, and try to come up with a little better plan of finalizing everything and determining, we've accounted for all the people, nobody's buried in any of the rubble, and we'll go on from there.
Did you have the National Guard helping out too? Did you have National Guard came in right after ours and set up a perimeter for us right away that evening? And even Carl Rovog was out here with them that night, and he was going on up the highway, I thought, visiting all the communities.
We didn't get the Guard the first night. The Guard didn't get in till the next day. And it was a unit, I think, that came out of Anoka. And and they then were able to help with security and give a big lift to the police departments as they tried to control the access. There's so many access points into Fridley that and if you got a way in, you've got a way out. And to try and maintain some semblance of order of who's coming in and where they're going and keeping an eye on them was a big task, and that's what the Guard did for us.
I've gotten some statistics that differ a little bit. According to some of the things that I've picked up, Mounds View had 8 people killed, and others said 6. Can either of you substantiate that? One or the other?
Well, I can't substantiate it for Mounds View, but there was only 2 in Fridley, and one of them was a stillborn babe. And the other was an elderly lady that wasn't killed that first night. She died subsequently. Don?
In Mounds View, seems to me that there was 6 that I can, recall right now, and that's all I believe we had is 6 of them. And I think the whole metro area wasn't something like 13 of them, something like that. Yeah.
Certainly, it was I'm sure it was the worst storm that any of the three of us witnessed or lived through. Bob, you have given us for this program, you've given us some rare film that was shot on 6mm Super 8, I believe.
8mm.
I'm sorry, 8mm. You're right, and we've had that. We'll be using that on this program. It looked like almost total destruction. Did you shoot that the day after or days after?
Well, most of that was taken on the third day. The first 2 days, I didn't get out of the firehouse or out of the field at all. So that was the third day that I was able to go home and change some clothes and pick up my camera and go out and do a little of that type of work.
Well, certainly the pictures are very, very true of what happened to this area. Demolishment. I think Mounds View had about 150 houses destroyed.
We did have quite a few houses. It was, I think, all told somewhere way up in 78, something like that. It's in the Knollwood area alone, over into most of the Mounds View area. And a lot of the ones were really totally destroyed. We had to have organization come in and work out a deal so we could haul a lot of the homes away, and they just had to rebuild. That was the next big thing that we had, and I'm sure Fridley and some of the others had the same thing, was the insurance people want to come in right away and settle up, but we kept them out for a day or two and let the people get a chance to look at their homes and see that with our building inspector and a crew went through to check the homes, and we did the checking on what we felt was totally destroyed and what should be replaced. And that way the insurance company could work with the people then. Otherwise, a lot of times they come up and they wanted, a few $1,000s to settle up, and we wanted to make sure the people had the right, got the right fair deal on it.
Yeah, Bob?
Well, Freddie, with two of them going through there, we had some significant numbers to deal with, but when we got into shaking out the facts and figures on it after it was over, we found that 1,500 homes had suffered total damage or 50% or more. And with current building codes, 50% damage is a total loss, so you have to deal with it on that basis. The insurance companies were a problem. As a matter of fact, one in particular that spent a lot of time in court trying to get out of it. But in Minnesota, was considered to be a face value state where they were obligated to pay the amount of the face value of the policy without horsing around and saying that, well, this didn't count or that didn't count, and that's where a lot of litigation was involved. But the city council worked pretty hard on it, and we got some help from the state on that too, to bring those insurance companies to their knees and get those issues settled in a hurry.
But a few statistics here that are very interesting. Unity Hospital was a new hospital in those days, as you know, and they had 3 doctors there the night of the tornado. Started out with 3, and shortly after that they had 53 doctors who were there to help. And the next morning they were 145 beds that were occupied, and those numbers of doctors really helped out. And you mentioned Carl Rolvog was there. Did he come to? Did he stick around at all, or was it just a?
Yes.
Was it just a curiosity visit?
Yeah, Carl Rolvog came out right with the. He came out. The governor did, and then he walked right through the site with me and everything, and he was right along with the National Guard. So I was really, impressed. I never, realized the governor would come out right away to see what's going on, and then offered all the support he could give to us.
Another piece that I've uncovered was that Fridley Junior High School was hit by the tornado quite badly, but there were no injuries. The newspaper accounts suggested that the teachers had all the students lie on the floor, Can you verify that, Bob?
No, I can't. But I don't think the kid should have been in school at 7 o'clock anyhow, so, which was the time that it happened.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
an interesting sidelight to this is one of the things that I think helped us over in Fridley is, we hadn't really secured ourselves from a flood that had occurred in April. We still had our couple shelters open with people living in shelters, and we were able to get that stuff going in a good hurry. Then, because of that fact, we were still in an emergency situation from a previous event.
Well, there certainly were a lot of individual stories that we're hoping to bring in to be a part of this program, and it was if you recall that day, June 6th, May 6th, it was really hot and humid, and I remember that because I was teaching in a St. Paul school at the time, and no air conditioning, and the kids get kind of upset, and it wasn't until we started hearing WCCO radio reports. Charlie, I think it was Boone and Chapman, who did most of the. Dick Chapman was big on it. I think they stayed on the radio for about 6.5, 7 hours during that time, bringing up some pretty good reports as they received them from the Weather Bureau. And certainly, would that tornado been as severe as it was if we had modern day technology and communications? Let you answer that, Bob.
Well, yeah, I think the effects of it probably would, when you look at the physical damage, would probably have been the same, because you get a warning, you can't alter a building or change its reaction to a storm. Over the long haul, I think you probably would come up with fewer injuries than what you did with the current warning systems in place. Fridley had no warning system at that time. We didn't have any of the civil defense sirens at that time, and so the only warnings that people got were when it was there, and they had to go from there.
That was a calamitous year, if you remember, beyond the tornadoes. It was the year that we had the tremendous floods, the high water mark when you go over to the area, around Shakopee, where they had tremendous flooding. We had, and the Twins were in the World Series that year. You see, so all kinds of things, were happening.
Busy year.
Yeah, and. But is there any one thing that as you just in remembering from what you saw and what you did, is there any one event that stands out more than anything else?
Well, not for me. I don't think there was. That was my business. That's what I did. But I think the most remarkable thing that I saw is the resiliency of the people. They bounced back so fast and so generously to make something like that seem not really as bad as it is. Don, did you have any comment on that?
I was just going to say that for me it was just like a bomb burst over there in the Nolan area, because there's so many, nothing but the basement left. And you do have people have a sense of humor, though. When we were going through to check out the homes to see just what damage was done the next day, and doing that report like I was telling you about, on damages and stuff, a fella had tacked a open house sign in front of his, and that's all he had was just the basement left. And I thought, my lands, how could you have a sense of humor after your home blows away? But some people just seem to roll with it pretty good, like you say, and they come back. And I know in Fridley you probably had the same thing. I think when I tried to check out one time, and then I had to stop and get an armband from somebody at one of your places, and I went through with the civil defense director from Hennepin County at that time, Wally, I can't remember names now, but anyway, he had taken me through, and you had a terrible street there, Mississippi. It went from University Avenue and all the way down, and that was a lot of damage there, wasn't there? Great, and you must have had some other areas too, didn't you? Mobile home, I saw out by 65 there. Or?
The mobile home park got it real good. The Hayes School right on Mississippi suffered a lot of damage, in addition to the junior high school. As a matter of fact, the Parkview School, the junior high school, the Hayes School, all took a good hit on this and had significant damage to them. The Methodist Church there right across from the Hayes School, the roof of that, well, one of our fire apparatus had to stop to put part of it back on, and it had blown off, and just as they stopped, the roof of that Methodist church sat down on the road right in front of them. So had they not stopped, they would have been a part of the problem. We would have been looking for them also.
We're going to call it quits at this point, guys, and thanks much for coming, and we'll be hearing about you again in the tornado video. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
There weren't many people who could get pictures like this because people weren't allowed in. He drove through to see, what it looked like, and so we took pictures.
We're driving through a residential area here, and I'm guessing that it's probably up in what we would call Melody Manor, which would be north of 73rd on the east side of University Avenue. I think Fridley only had probably 10 police officers at that time, the looting had already started, and then that ends pretty quickly. This wasn't a structure fire at all. This was many structures on fire. Here we had created a huge rubble pile from the cleanup process, and we burned that in the area. That area would now be the site of the Columbia Arena.
So when you said that they were burning the houses there, how many, was that entire neighborhoods? I mean, was there one place they dumped everything?
Yeah, just one, it all went to one place.
So they just hauled everything over into the one spot for all of Fridley, or?
There's a load of homes being dumped there. This heavy equipment was lent to us by Truck Crane Service Company to assist in the cleanup. Fire like that you probably wouldn't be able to do today with the pollution standards that are in place. At one time, that pile before we lit it was over 3 stories tall.
And how many days did that burn?
Oh, weeks.
It was
Weeks.
Yeah.
Did people have asthma or something? I mean, I can just imagine all the stuff, the carpet and the drapes and everything that you wouldn't. Yeah. That you're right. You probably couldn't just do an
No, you couldn't do
anymore.
that anymore. No. This would be along 73rd Avenue, running from University over towards Highway 65. Again, that would be the Melody Manor area. Phone booth had been set up so people could make their calls. A couple of those were set up through the city.
That was set up after the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was looking at that going, I can't believe the phone booth survived.
No, that was put there so
After.
they could. Mm-hmm.
Now, did most people stay and rebuild here? Did you have people give up and just
Oh,
move away?
I'm sure a few gave up, but not a lot. A few places had problems with their insurance, and the State Department of Commerce took care of that for them. Well, I probably took some of them. Dorothy might have taken some of them as we were driving along. Most of these were taken probably 3 or 4 days after the tornado had been through. Okay, that's down by the St. Stevenson School off East River Road. These are up in the trailer court on 75th and Osborne Road and Highway 65. But this, I was over some of the islands in the Pacific after in World War II, just at the end of the war I was over there. And that's the way a lot of those look too, just like they've been bombed out, and trees would all be denuded. You can see them big poles. Those are 95 foot tall. A lot of those got sheared off.
So it looked like it got to be nice weather after that. I mean, it's pretty sunny, hardly any clouds in the sky.
Oh, it had been nice. It was nice when it happened, really. It was quite a warm day to be able to build up that kind of energy. I think they said those storm clouds were topping off at about 50,000 feet. So.
Wow.
Most of this footage, I think, is just northeast of the Hayes School. North of Mississippi Street between University and Highway 65. They do a pretty complete job, those tornadoes.
I think the for rent sign was
Yeah.
a joke.
Oh yeah, there was quite a bit of that.
The vignetting at the edges where it goes to black.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
you had to turn your turret. You had 3 lenses on the camera, on old 8mm. I just converted. There's a house Hardy's touch, and then one where both the ends are missing.
Oh, is that the shadow of your car?
Probably, if it's moving.
Well, some of these it looks like the car was staying put a little
I think
bit.
we stopped sometimes because you couldn't get it all in.
So you're the one who was the camera person for a lot of
Yeah,
this?
well, he had to drive, and we just did the best we could with what we had.
I must have a bunch of slides on this too, because I had a pretty decent slide camera.
Wow.
Trying to identify some of these areas are pretty difficult. I think we're back up towards the trailer court again.
Yeah, that's a car that was flipped on its side.
Over.
Yeah.
This looks to be the area close to Parkview School. It'll be around 61st and 5th, 6th, and 7th Street. But Fridley was lacking any warning system at all. They hadn't even made an application for warning sirens at that point.
It's funny how some walls go and some don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out, was it a late spring or were all the leaves ripped off?
Oh, the leaves were ripped off. It was May is not, it was May 6th. That's early on. But it just denuded some of those trees. Here we're getting down in the commercial area. I think this is a junior high school on 61st and Westmore Lake Drive.
So since it was in the evening, school would have been out,
Yeah.
right?
There was an event going on at one of the, I think it was at the senior high. I thought it was the senior high, but Alan said it was the junior high. So, but there was some event going on at that time. That guy should get a ticket for parking there.
The next guy, the upside down one.
And there's the Parkview School, just a piece of.
Now, were they able to rebuild those, or did they
Oh yeah,
tear
that's
them down and start over?
that school's still there, and the junior high was rebuilt. And now this school is used partly community center and for education. The fire station wasn't really designed to be a drive-through.
So were the vehicles also damaged, or?
Well, no, we were they were all out. See, one was in the station when that back wall went out, but the rest of them were all out on the road already.
Was it just one wall that went down? Was there more damage to
the
that?
back wall, yeah. The power went out, so the doors couldn't come down. And as the storm went through, you were able to build up a tremendous amount of pressure in there, and it just pushed that back wall out. And there's your National Guard unit was setting up. I was in the station at the time that happened. I was huddled down in the corner. We had some little partitioned offices out there where the chief and I worked, and half walls on them, Got hid behind one of those, the best I could. It was a volunteer department. There was only 2 of us that were career firefighters, the chief and myself. They'd have been at the station anyhow because it was drill night. Thursday night was always drill night. And some of them were already there, and the rest were coming because of the page.
Well, that's something else that people don't think about, is that all these firemen had to rush up to the station and leave their families. And the storm was not over. There was more coming, So a lot of wives got left with their kids by themselves to do the best they could.
And most of these homes were down along Main Street, south of Highway 100.
Well, that was a bunch of rentals.
Yeah, these were apartments right here, rental properties. Well, we had people out working that didn't even know whether their families were safe or not. They had answered the call when the pagers went off and left, and that was before the tornado actually hit.
Now, had they already cleared that? Why is the ground so bare? Or that was a construction area before?
Yeah, I think so. That's along the edge of the highway. Highway was Highway 100 then, before it became the interstate system. This was Graves interior. Again, we're down in south of what's now 694. This is 61st and 6th Street. People got to cleaning up in a hurry, gathering up, trying to find what they could. You know, there's so many personal things that you try to find. There's a guy flirting with danger.
So Washington Street.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be just south of the high school.
Was the water tower damaged?
No, well, it was marked up, but it wasn't, didn't spray any leaks or anything. They're just coming back from a call.
Looks like the street is dug up
Mhm.
right in front of those caution signs.
It probably was a utility break, and there was a collapse of the street there.